From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is the original podcast about consumption, and we are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all our previous episodes, as well as our co-conspirators and fellow You Run Podcast Network member shows at yourunpodcast.com. With me this week is the host of, not the You Run Podcast, of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. His name is Sean. And Sean, I got to ask, been waiting all week. How do you like your ribs?
Fuck a duck. I don't know. I like them with stuff on them.
Stuff on them? Just random stuff?
If you're seriously asking, I like them with sauce.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
With stuff on them? I'm thinking like rubber ducky
Stuff.
Jolly Rancher.
There you go. That'd be pretty cool. I'd
That
try
would
it.
suck. You take a big chomp into a rib and you get snag on a Jolly Rancher. I mean, the flavor might work.
Let me pitch this to you. What if it was spicy but had Jolly Rancher flavor too?
Okay. So I like sweet and spicy.
There you go.
I could see that.
See?
Depending on the Jolly Rancher.
Salvaged.
You do cherry, maybe grape. I'm with you. You get into green apple, probably going to be pissed.
I like green apple, but I think it has to be in limited quantities.
Oh, for sure.
I really like lemon, and those aren't,
Mhm.
you don't get those very often anymore. It seems like you have to get the exotic pack to get those.
I thought you just have to get the big ass. You know what?
Oh,
I haven't
maybe.
bought a Jolly Rancher in probably a decade, so what do I know?
I feasted on Jolly Ranchers after my surgery. That was my feast. I was like, yeah, gonna have myself a feast. I love peach.
Peach? Okay.
Peach Jolly Rancher's good too, but those are old school flavors.
I like those. I don't even know the brand of them. They come in a white bag and they have a lemon one and a cherry one and whatnot. They're just like old lemon head style lemon heads.
Mm.
They're like $1.50 a bag, but I like those because they're taste better than Jolly Ranchers. I'm gonna look them up and find out what they're called. It's gonna bug me.
Let's do this. They're not Cherry Clan and Lemon Heads, right? I don't think they make Cherry Clan anymore.
This one's they definitely make cherry still. It is Clay's. So, but Clay is spelled Claey, lemon drops, cherry. They have like maybe 6 flavors, but lemon and cherry are the ones that you find most often. And they're the best. So, whatever.
I feel like the Cherry Clan ones aren't PC, so they make Cherry Lemon Heads now, or whatever they call them.
I feel like putting the word clan in your candy title, it's just opening yourself up to all kinds of ridicule. In other news.
It's with a C. Does that help?
No. Well, maybe if you have Wu-Tang in front of it. What have you been watching this week, Sean?
I got a few things that I was able to watch. I know that I think this was definitely in Search of Darkness, The Zero Boys. Do you remember seeing the Zero Boys trailer in Search of Darkness and them talking about it?
Vaguely. Refresh my memory.
So basically the movie starts out as a paintball war. Like the first 15 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes is like a paintball war between these two sides, and one are dressed like GIs and the other ones are dressed up kind of like Nazis, for lack of a better term. I mean, they actually wear like the swastika armbands and stuff.
Military 50. Oh, okay.
And that quickly turns into a horror movie. So the first half is this paintball war, or this first quarter of it, I guess, is this paintball war, and it turns into a horror movie, kind of like a Deliverance backwoods thing. So they win, the Zero Boys win the paintball war, and the prize for the lead guy, which I can't remember his name, is basically the other team's lead guy's girlfriend, played by Kelly Maroney, which could be taken very offensively, I think. And she's offended, so I'm offended for her. And so they go off and they're supposed to have this like weekend kind of party thing, and they find an old cabin. I guess it's kind of furnished, but looks kind of dumpy too. And they find out that the cabin is actually inhabited by these backwoods, like Deliverance type dudes. And the paintball team...
This sounds like it's going to get all kinds of rapey, and I'm not into that.
It's not really. I mean, that's
where it sounds like you're going.
Well, the paintball team trains with real weapons in their off time. Like, they play paintball, but they train with real live ammunition of guns when they shoot, which, why not? So they carry all these real guns and live ammunition and stuff, and they hunt down the backwoods people while the backwoods people are hunting them down. So it's this back and forth. There's not really any rapey stuff from what I can tell, but they have a setup where it's like a dungeon and they're filming snuff type material. They don't really show much besides a videotape and little clips, but it's heavily implied.
Mm-hmm.
They make a lot of references to Jason Voorhees. So a lot of these jokes are like, oh, Jason's going to come out. And they're talking about Jason Voorhees. It's not just like some guy named Jason. So that was kind of interesting. The thing that's really weird about the movie is that it's about an hour and 35 minutes, hour and 40 minutes. And the end comes immediately. Like it's really intense, gets intense, and then it just drops off. It immediately ends. And the dialogue, the talking is so stupid. It is inane. Some of the worst nonsensical, all the characters just seem like the stupidest people in the world. So that's a little bit entertaining. Joe Estevez is in it. So that's, that's a plus.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just really ends very abruptly. I had to look it up because I'm like, is something wrong with what I'm watching, like the copy I'm watching? But no.
I kind of like movies that do that where it ends abruptly. You're almost like, wait, did something break or is this how it ended? And I don't know. You don't see that a lot anymore or ever really. But when it pops up, it's kind of like, oh, okay. It's almost like a different shock to the system.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's a turn off your brain kind of movie for sure. Other than that, I talked last week, I was going on a trip for work. So on the way back on the plane, I got a chance to watch a 2000 film called Takedown. And basically the summary of the movie is that it's based on the capture, I'm using air quotes here, based on the capture of Kevin Mitnick. I don't know if you know who Kevin Mitnick is, but he was a pretty like high profile hacker in the late 90s. And he's just a guy. Like he's not super attractive. He just is like a normal nerdy kind of dude.
Well, if he's a hacker in the 2000s, I wouldn't expect him to be very attractive.
Yeah. So this movie stars Skeet Ulrich as Kevin Mitnick.
I like Skeet Ulrich.
Donal Logue, Russell Wong, Master P, Jeremy Sisto, Tom Berenger, Christopher McDonald, aka Shooter McGavin.
Is this on Plex?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So one of the writers of the movie was Satomo Shimura, who is actually a character in the movie as well. He is a character in this quote unquote real life tale of capturing Kevin Mitnick. And so, of course, it's way, way embellished, exaggerated, ridiculous. The story's roughly, like I said, how this badass hacker Kevin Mitnick, who was not all that badass, but was a fugitive for a while, was able to steal this code that, and I don't know if this part's true or not, but in the movie, he steals a code that is called the Nocatel code, I think is what it's called. And it basically in the 90s, it was something that they say that you could use your cell phone as like a receiver. So you could intercept nearby calls and listen in on phone conversations and stuff. The entire movie is this kind of cat and mouse chase thing. If you like the movie Hackers, like the Angelina Jolie, Matthew Lillard Hackers movie, you'll think
the other half of screen.
You'll think that this is a masterpiece. I mean, this is like full of all the swirly numbers and shit. They over exaggerate. If you know anything about how the internet worked in the late 90s, you will just laugh your ass off at like 90% of this movie because it is over the top ridiculous and amazingly great.
I don't really like Hackers because frankly, I find it to be annoying.
I do too. There's a lot of people that love it though.
Oh, I know, and I don't ever really. I mean, more power to you, but it's not one that I really get that. I don't have that love affair for that movie.
Yeah, this is a little bit more grounded in reality, if you could, for what that's worth. But it's just really dumb fun. It's so stupid and hilarious.
Well, I do like dumb fun. And I actually do like Skeet Ulrich. He's in, I want to say it's a Wes Craven like werewolf movie or something too. Maybe it's not. I don't know. He was in another movie after Scream that is supposed to be pretty good. I never saw it, and it got buried because it was something Wes did between Scream movies. I guess at that point, people were like, "Who's this Wes Craven asshole? He's not doing Scream. I don't know if I give a shit."
Never heard of him.
Forgetting all the other amazing works he did, like Shocker.
Yeah. Shocker.
We really should talk about that movie at some time. That's a fun movie.
I think Takedown is a prime candidate for the show, though. I could talk a lot about how stupid this movie is. Also on the plane, I started the new True Detective Night Country season 4 with Jodie Foster, and
I'm about where I wanted to get to start on that because I wanted to get like maybe 4 or 5 episodes kind of banked in before I got on that.
Yep.
So, well, as we're recording the Super Bowls in 2 days, I'll probably hammer it out pretty quick after that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it a little bit more. It's got, not to give, I've only watched the first episode, so I'm like, basically we're in the same spot. The show feels a lot more like leaning towards supernatural than it ever has. I mean, I think season 1, I've seen all the seasons. Season 1 seemed like it had a little bit of that.
I watched season 1 and I love season 1.
Oh, yeah.
But season 1 has a very slow build until it doesn't. They have that one amazing one shot that's like half the episode, which is where that show really hooked me. And if you haven't seen True Detective season 1, go back and watch that, please. It's a great show. It deserves your attention.
It is probably one of the best seasons of television like ever.
I also would go as far to say it's Matthew McConaughey's best role, period.
And it was a bit of a renaissance for him, or a resurgence, not a renaissance, but a resurgence for him, because he had kind of like done the rom-com thing for a while.
Mm-hmm. That was around when he did Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah.
Too.
He did
Similar
Dallas
time
Buyers
frame.
Club, and then he did this, and it became like, it shot him up again into the next level.
When season 2 came out, it didn't really hook me like at all. Like I think I gave it 2 or 3 episodes and it just wasn't doing anything for me, so I stopped. That's one of the things I learned from Dexter is if a show can't keep your attention, don't waste 6 seasons of time with it or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then I never went back to this is season 5 now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't go back to season 3 or 4, but when I saw Jodie Foster was on
this
it.
is 4.
Is it
Sorry.
4?
I'm thinking
Okay.
Fargo was 5. Yeah, this is season 4.
Okay. Well, I never went back to season 3, but when I saw Jodie Foster was on, I'm like, that's a pretty big name to get on a show like this. Like, you have my attention, HBO.
I like 2 and 3. I couldn't tell you. Oh, well, 2 is the one with Colin Farrell.
Yeah, which
And
is
whoever
not a
else.
selling point generally. And the best thing you can say you did was Horrible Bosses. That's not necessarily a selling point as far as being in that kind of show.
Yeah, and season 3 was pretty good. That was Mahershala Ali. That was a pretty good season.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one seems like it's going to be pretty good. And then lastly but not leastly, just before the show today, I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Shocking Truth. It was on Amazon Prime. It's like a behind the scenes kind of quote unquote documentary about the making
I've
of
seen so
Texas
seen so
Chainsaw
many of
Massacre.
those.
Yeah, and this is something not show related, but something that really gets on my nerves about Amazon Prime is when you scroll through the things that they just have, a lot of it's freebie stuff. Some of it is Amazon. They tell you that it's released in a certain year. And when you actually watch it, it's not the same year. So you'll think, oh, this is a new thing. It's 2023 release. And you look and it's actually from like 2017. This one said it was a 2020 release. So that's really what kind of made me want to watch it. I thought there was actually like actual behind the scenes stuff other than some pictures and stuff that they had taken. And what it was from like 2003. So it looks VHS-y. It's 4:3. It's not widescreen, I don't think. So it was fine. I mean,
I've seen so many making of TCM shows and whatnot which is weird because it's not my favorite movie by far. Like I get the fascination with it, but in the big scheme of horror movies, like especially 70s, like influential films, for me, it's not even like top 5 of that era. Did you see they just announced another one? They're doing another, I don't know who's got it, but he's not a friend of the show, but Crazy Duck Designs has a new poster out, and I guess the movie got lit. It's got Leatherface like essentially melted into the chainsaw, but it looks like the original Leatherface mask because they don't last. They're like sneakers. You got to buy new ones every couple months.
yeah, you got to sell new merch.
Right.
No, I didn't see that. I didn't hear that.
Mixed feelings on that, mostly because I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, 2020, whatever year the last one was, and mixed feelings about that. But that franchise is like such a fucking acid trip to begin with from movie to movie that I really feel like it's like you get the first one, and despite everything that I just said, it is a classic. You can't really deny the impact that movie had on film in general. Then you get the second one, which is, in my opinion, the best movie out of the whole franchise because it's just so fucking all over the place, Then you get the third one that tries to bring it back to being grimy and whatever, and it kind of falls flat. And then you go to Matthew McConaughey on like all the drugs in one movie with, Zellweger doing whatever. And then they reboot it with surprisingly a really good reboot. Like I would think of all the movies, if you said, we're going to reboot Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that would be one I'd be like, that doesn't sound like it's going to work. But that reboot's actually, as far as reboots go, pretty solid. And then they did like 3 or 4 more that are just like utter dog shit. Well, my opinion, Yeah. So I don't know. That's like the weirdest hit and miss franchise out there. I know there's people that absolutely adore it, and I'm about as middle of the road as I feel about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, about the same as I feel about Hellraiser. If I had to pick one, I'd probably pick Texas over Hellraiser just because it's a little less like erotic bondagey, I guess.
Mhm.
If I'm going to be uncomfortable and bored, let's just go for sheer like sadism, I guess. I mean, it's not like I won't watch it eventually.
Yeah, that's all I watched. That was it.
Well, would you like to hear about some of the shit that I watched?
Why don't you just tell me about the shows that you've watched, John?
So I kind of went all over the map this week. So I'll get my rewatches out of the way first. As mentioned before we were on, I had a stupid day. So I came home and took an elbow and watched stupid movies. So I watched Cruel Jaws, which I know you haven't seen yet, but that is one that we are going to have to talk about sooner than later because it has a shark and discount Hulk Hogan in it. Chef's kiss. And then I also, that same evening, rewatched Leprechaun 4, Leprechaun in Space. And I'm a little disappointed that that's not the movie we're doing for Frankenstein's as opposed to the first Leprechaun movie, which is the better movie. But it's not in space and it's not as bizarre as when you can watch a movie that you've seen several times and still sit there and be like, what the fuck is going on in this show of a movie? That's usually a good sign. So I got those out of the way. And then I kind of went down a little bit of a sort of documentary hole, like only a couple titles, but I watched A&P Films, who did Murdercise and Slasher Red Party and so on, their YouTube channel got taken down but put back up, and they have a little 30-ish minute documentary about Ginger Lynn, which is really just them interviewing her about some of the films she's done, and this is up to Slasher Red Party, so it's pre-Murdercise, and it's not talking about her porno movies, it's talking about like her workout movie and some other horror movies she's been in and shit like that. And I was like, oh, I like this old lady. She's just like super sweet and talking like she's playing with this porno action figure of herself and she's mad that the panties ripped off and stuff. And I don't know. I was like, I never had any reason to dislike Ginger Lynn before. Like, she's fine. You know, she's an actress. I have nothing against her. But watching her in this, I'm like, oh, I like this lady now. So that's good. And that's on YouTube. That's definitely worth, if you have 30 minutes to kill, that's worth checking out. And it's a nice little quick watch. And then on Netflix, they have it's about an hour and a half. They have a little documentary on The Greatest Night in Pop, which is about the recording of We Are the World. Have you watched this yet? I know Drew and Mike talked about it, so I'm sure you're probably aware of it.
Yeah, I heard a lot about it. I didn't watch it yet, though. I kind of want to watch it with my kids and see what they think, but I don't know if they're interested.
That would be more interesting, probably. The one thing I will say is you will be fucking tired of hearing We Are the World by the end of the movie. And there is a good chance you will wake up the next day with We Are the World stuck in your head. And if you don't know what We Are the World is, basically, this was what? Late 80s, early 90s, something like that?
It was definitely 80s. It was not. It was like 86, 87, maybe?
Yeah, well, all the biggest like pop stars of the time get together and sing a song to end hunger in Africa or some shit like that, which did not work. People are still hungry everywhere. But it's about the recording process of this one song with all these like massive stars. And
leave your ego at the door.
Yeah. Really, the best part of this entire documentary to me is watching Bob Dylan look incredibly like confused and pissed off and listening to Bruce Springsteen sound like his voice got ran over by a railroad tractor of some sort. Like, it just sounds fucking shot. I guess he just came off tour at some point with it. He literally got off a plane and went to this recording studio after his Born in the USA tour, which, if you know anything about the boss, that was like his biggest mainstream hit. And I go as far to say is I actually like Bruce Springsteen, but not that album. That album's like,
it's too commercial for you.
There's a lot of weird artists there's a lot of artists in that like 80s period.
You liked him before he was big.
Well, George Harrison's a guy like this too. Like, they had this weird period in the 80s where they just embrace 80s pop for whatever fucking reason. And then they went back to their either folk rocky, like singer-songwriter shit or whatever they were doing before that. I don't know. That era.
I mean, everybody does that. So
it was a weird era
disco,
for that, though.
All those disco albums.
Yeah, there was that too. You know, your reason to watch it's probably better than what I did. I was just bored and was like, yeah, this seems moderately interesting. Yeah, it's okay. The other thing that I watched, which is absolutely worth mentioning, if not, I'm not going to go as far to say it's worth checking out, but our good friend and occasional sadist friend, Jordana from Pretty Killer Podcast, sent me a message and she says, you need to get really high and watch this movie. And I was like, well, I'm halfway there. So she told me to watch The Greasy Strangler, which is a movie that is on. Are you aware of this movie?
No, I mean, I just like the title.
So it's a movie. That's not the word I would use. It's a movie that's on Amazon, so you can watch it for free. And anyone who's listening to this, watch at your own, caution or whatever.
Peril.
Yeah. She goes, I understand exactly why she said you need to be high when you watch this. And I got about halfway through. I'm like, I don't think I'm high enough to be watching this, but this is the most drug trip movie that I've seen in quite some time. It's exactly what the title implies. There's tons of like weird, like old man and middle-aged dong in it. Not in ways that you want, but there are moments where it's pretty funny, like that the dong keeps reappearing. But talk about a movie that just like outstays its welcome. It's only like an hour and a half long. I'm like, you could seriously shave an hour, like not an hour, 30 minutes of this off, and it would be just fine. But it is a bizarre, fucked up movie. It is the kind of movie that you watch and you immediately feel like you need a shower after just because of what you're, not the murder part or what, because it's called spoilers. It's a movie about a strangler that has murders in it. That part's fine. But all the amount of grease on everything in this movie, you by the end of it, you're just like, oh, it's just, it's unsettling, but she actually, I talked to her about it the next day and she described it really well. She's like, it's a Tim and Eric acid trip with murder. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a very, very,
you're selling me.
It's a very accurate description, because when I was watching, it's like, this feels like a Lost Adult Swim sketch that has like just tons of dong in it. So yeah, that is a very possible show type of movie too, except I don't really want to watch it again anytime soon. So maybe later in the year, or maybe we can get her on and try to figure that out. So Jordan, if you hear this, we might pester you to watch that weird ass fucking movie again. That was pretty much it. That was all I watched. Got anything else you want to hit before we break?
Nope, that's all I got too.
Well, shit. All right. Well, we will be back momentarily. We're going to take a break, and then we will come back and talk about the title of this episode, which is Action Jackson.
There's nothing better than hanging out with your best friends chatting horror movies. At Voices from the Mausoleum, we have programming that covers everything from found footage to gaming, interviews, and even the first horror morning talk show. Come join us. We're all friends at the Mausoleum.
All right, so we're back, and like I had mentioned before this silly little break, we are going to be talking about the movie Action Jackson, which came out in 1988. And the reason we are talking about this movie is because as of the time of this recording, last week, Carl Weathers has passed away. We're both pretty bummed about that, and we wanted to take some time to talk about one of his movies. And there's really no movie that, there's movies that he's certainly more well known for, but this is probably one of his more, what's a good way to say
just this? One of his bigger starring roles, I think.
Yeah, I think this is his first role where he was the lead.
Yeah, I was trying to find out what other things he had been in that where he was the actual lead, but I think this was, if not his first, his biggest. Like this, when you think of Carl Weathers as a leading man, this would be the movie that you would think of.
Yeah. So we start with a third-party review. And I didn't want to read a book because that's not what I like to do, but I picked the review that kind of pissed me off the most, and I'm kind of hoping that I get some rage out of Sean out of this, so we're going to go with this one. Alex K, fuck you, Alex. We're going to read your review anyway. Gives this movie 2 stars out of 5, and he says, my favorite action film is 1988's Die Hard.
I like the deadpan at the end. I wish that we had that this was like a video podcast in this instance, because the face you made was just like, it's like when your face comes to rest after you just said the words. And
fuck you, Alex. You don't like the movie, fine. But why? I like Die Hard too, but that has nothing to do with this fucking movie.
Well, we'll talk about it. So we go to IMDb. It has the plot and the storyline. We're going to start with the plot first because that's on top. And I'm lazy and I don't want to scroll down. So
fair.
The plot is vengeance drives a tough Detroit cop to stay on the trail of a power-hungry auto magnate who is systematically eliminating his competition. If we scroll down to the storyline, this is a little bit of a long one, a little longer of one, and this will hopefully take place instead of my usual breakdown of the plot, but this is from our buddy Todd Baldridge. Todd, nice to meet you. It says, Jericho Action Jackson is a Detroit police sergeant who was demoted from lieutenant for almost tearing the arm off of sexually violent sociopath Sean Delaplane.
He has a spare.
Whose father is Peter Delaplane, a major car manufacturer. But Delaplane himself is violent as well. Delaplane kills his wife Patrice by shooting her, spoiler alert, and he plants her body at Jackson's apartment, framing Jackson. Delaplane won't miss Patrice very much because he has a drug-addicted mistress named Sydney Ash. He keeps Sydney hooked with a free supply of heroin. Jackson suspects Delaplane of masterminding masterminding. Is that the word? Masterminding?
Sure.
A murder spree against local officials from the auto workers union. Delaplane's mission is to gain a political power base and choose the next president of the United States. That's way deeper than I knew anything about. And because of what happened to Delaplane's son, Sean, Delaplane has taken a particular dislike to Jackson. Jackson gets Sidney's help in going after Delaplane. ...
I gotta agree with you. That storyline
a bit of a
is
stretch.
way deeper than anything I took out of this movie. And that's not to say anything negative about this movie. I'm not trying to go there, but to be perfectly fair, at the heart of it, this is a pretty typical 80s-ish action movie. I mean, sure, you could get that. I get. Apparently someone did. Todd did. Stupid name.
I think there's like an allusion to something about Delaplane himself wanting to be president, but he basically says something to the effect of he's the one that comes up with the ideas or something. He doesn't carry them out, or basically he doesn't want to be the president. But this is kind of an issue with the storyline here, because this storyline basically tells you, like when I said spoiler alert, I added that. That's like, I mean, this is a, almost 30-year-old movie, but 25, whatever.
5-year-old. 35.
30. Okay. 30. My math is not, it's fallible, but we're looking at this and it basically tells you, so this, it tells you a lot. So I want to just talk about the cast of this movie, because much like the plot
before we go into the cast,
yeah,
can we take a second to mention that, because we're both guys from the Detroit area.
Yes.
I really love seeing a movie that features Detroit this much. And I don't remember what Detroit looked like in 1988. I was around for it, but I don't have like vivid memory of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they actually took a lot of time to highlight the fact that this movie is taking place in Detroit, not like other movies that have either shot. The movie
RoboCop
Narc comes to mind, or RoboCop, but Narc comes to mind from you. They made a big deal about that. This is a movie that takes place in Detroit, but you can clearly, if you're local, when you watch that movie, you're like, no, you're in Toronto. Detroit's on the other side of that river that you keep running in front of. Like
that river,
yeah,
that little stream over there, that creek,
right? But anyway, I really appreciate, and that's just totally like homerism on my part. But
yeah,
I really enjoy the fact that this movie is, and again, your guess is as good as mine how much was actually shot in Detroit, but I like that it's very much so a Detroit story. Anyway.
I did write notes, and I was going to ask you how much you thought was actually filmed in Detroit. There is a lot of things that I saw in the background that I was like, yeah, that's definitely Detroit. Like, I recognize that. And it did look like this. I thought it was really kind of funny that at the beginning of the movie, after the first scene that we'll probably talk about, but when the movie really starts featuring Detroit, the opening credits, they show the Rensen, they show the People Mover. There's a scene that's on the People Mover.
I love that they show the People Mover.
I thought it was hilarious.
That makes me laugh my ass off. Yeah.
That there were actually people riding the People Mover, because if you've ridden the People Mover, nobody rides it.
Right.
Because it goes on. Actually, it gets ridden a little bit more, but it's a circular monorail.
For those who are not local to Detroit, the People Mover is Detroit's comical answer to public transportation. It doesn't go anywhere worth going. It basically just circles around all the parts of Detroit that no one stops at. Yeah, and you get weird coins for it. It used to be good. Didn't it used to, if I remember right, because I remember taking it to Tigers games when they were at the old stadium.
It stops at Grand Circus Park, which is like maybe a 2 or 3 minute walk from Comerica.
Okay. From Comerica or from Corktown?
From Comerica. But what happens is it only goes one direction. So at one point it was going the opposite direction. So you would take it from Grand Circus Park to like the way towards Cobo and all that stuff, or whatever Cobo is called nowadays. And that was like the whole circle to get from, like, if you parked in Greektown and you got on at Grand Circus Park, it's like a 40-minute ride. It takes forever, but now it goes the other way. So you can take it from Grand Circus to Greektown and it's like a 15-minute thing, which you could walk in that amount of time.
Right. Or you get an Uber for even less. But
they show all these establishing shots of, like I said, the Rensen. They show probably Woodward and stuff. But they show people on the People Mover. Nobody rides People Mover. And number two, one of the scenes, the cops are driving down the road and they see a guy that's like, they can tell he's going to try and commit a crime, like steal a person's handbag or whatever. And
I love that scene.
There are a million people on the street, which, unless you're in like the business district or business areas, basically on Woodward or near Campus Marshes, you don't see people on the street very often, unless there's like an event going on.
Yeah, I was going to say, unless there's a game going on or a concert or something, and that wouldn't be in the middle of the day. Well, maybe at opening day, but I do like that they let him attempt to steal the purse and and this is the most Detroit thing I've ever seen. Like, you see a very heavyset woman beat the fuck out of this kid for a good 5 minutes before the cops still arrest the kid, even though a woman just assaulted the shit out of him. She goes on her merry way. No problem. But that's very, I'm like, yeah, that checks. I like that. So
this movie is just packed with cast. These are all people that you recognize, and much like
pretty much everyone in Predator aside from Arnold and Jesse Ventura.
And much like Takedown, I'm going to mention a few of the names here. Joel Silver produced this movie, so he produced Predator. They kind of got together with Carl Weathers, and Joel Silver kind of got together, and Silver kind of approached him about a movie, and Weathers said, let me come up with an idea, and he wanted to do something that was kind of like blaxploitation kind of film, but he only had a character named the Action Jackson.
I've heard a lot of people say this is the last blaxploitation film, which I don't know enough about the subgenre to make that claim. Didn't Black Dynamite come out like in the 2000s?
Yeah, it did. So anyways, we have Carl Weathers, obviously, as Action Jackson. We have Bill Duke, who was in Predator, who was in Commando as his commanding officer. Armbruster, which is okay. That's a great name. Craig T. Nelson plays Delaplane.
Coach.
Sharon Stone is his wife. We have Tom Wilson, who you might remember as Biff from Back to the Future and other things. This is our second film that we're going to talk about, or that we've talked about, with Vanity. Last but not least,
we've talked about more films with Vanity than we have with Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, or Steven Seagal.
There you go. Vanity, quickly becoming an all-star, honorary, dearly departed third member of the show. We've also got, last but not least, I have to mention, I lost my shit when I recognized that Al Leong was in this film. And do you know who Al Leong is?
Not at the moment.
So he is the...
why don't you just tell me who he is?
Yeah, why don't you just tell me who Al Leong is? You know it's going to be a good movie when he shows up. He's basically the Asian guy that is in Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, he's not the only Asian guy in Big Trouble Little China, but he's in Bill and Ted. He is in They Live. He's basically like, I think in Lethal Weapon, he's the guy that has the battery cables that's like shocking Mel Gibson, probably for good reason. Yeah, I mean, this is just an all-star cast. And as our friend over on IMDb mentioned, Todd Baldridge, Sharon Stone is the wife of Craig T. Nelson of Delaplane. And she gets kind of taken out, I don't know, maybe half an hour into the movie. But the way, if you ever look at the poster for this movie, I think the revised poster, she's like in the background behind Weathers and Vanity, looking on, and you think, oh, Sharon Stone is in this movie. That she was immediately in, I think this is 80.
Basic Instinct was after this, because this is before Basic Instinct.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. But I think Total Recall was when I first remember seeing Sharon Stone like pop up on stuff.
I'm sure I noticed this before, but watching this movie now, I was like, I went through the time that she's on. I was like, God, this blonde woman is extremely beautiful. And then I was like, God, that's Sharon Stone. Like, she really because I always associate Sharon Stone with Casino, for better or worse. But she's so whacked out in that movie that I always think of her as just being some drugged up like psychopath. Not Sharon Stone, the human, but Sharon Stone,
the character
essentially. So seeing her in this, which if I remember right, she's a little whacked out in this too, but she looks good doing it, so whatever.
Yeah, she looks great.
No, I would agree with you. The cast in this, if you like action movies in general, just any action movie, short of having Arnold in this movie, which I wouldn't have even put it past them to have him do like a cameo of some sort just because, but they didn't. The cast in this movie is fantastic. You get, on top of everyone you just mentioned, you have, what's his fucking name? He played Billy in Predator, which is the one when I was watching this, he gets on I think it's like a knife fight or something with him.
He's like the drug dealer dude.
Yeah, I was like, holy shit, is that Billy that he just stabbed in the shoulder awkwardly? And yeah, I went and looked it up. I'm like, he's not on the top billing here, but yeah, this is a who's who of this generation's action movies. I'm not quite sure how Coach got in here. He's very awkward as a bad guy, but
oh man. Well, first off, Billy gets disposed, I guess. He gets thrown through a window and across an alleyway into the window of the adjacent building, which is
pretty amazing.
That's great. I think Craig T. Nelson in this movie is the perfect asshole. He plays a great asshole.
He's a great asshole, but when they try to make him do karate shit,
That
it looks
was hilarious. There's a face off between Carl Weathers and Craig T. Nelson, Action Jackson, and
This is
Delaplane.
way at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he does these roundhouse kicks and stuff. They don't ever show him doing it, and it's almost, to me, the way that it looked. When they show him from behind, it's clearly like a stuntman or something.
Right.
But when they show him face to face, or they show Craig T. Nelson's face, it almost is as if they fabricated like a big long pant leg on a broomstick or something and stuck a shoe on the end, and they're just like swinging it.
I would have said a 2x4, but you're in the same thought process. So
it's amazingly stupid the way that it looks. It's great. It's a joy.
And truthfully, if you see Carl Weathers in this movie, like, because this movie starts with them making him like kind of dignified, I guess, like he's wearing a suit at some point, or a tux at some point. He's well dressed and whatnot. And by mid movie, he's back to typical action, like, I'm wearing a polo, but it's ripped down to like my, belly. And when I'm not wearing that, I'm wearing no shirt, but I'm oiled up all the time. And I'm like as buff as a 1990 like WWE action figure that doesn't have any articulate. Like, there's no way that if you put Carl Weathers at this point in a room with Craig T. Nelson and, the Street Fighter guy said, fight, that Craig T. Nelson is winning this fight. It's just not happening. But whatever.
I love that the tagline on IMDb, this is what it says. Name, Jericho Jackson. Nickname, Action. Home, Detroit. Profession, cop. Education, Harvard Law. Where does that come from? Hobby, fighting crime, weapon. You're looking at him. Does that ever get mentioned?
I don't remember it, but sure. Why not?
I just think that's a funny little side thing that people just make shit up and they're like, yeah, cool.
What I do like about this movie, and this is a product, I'm saying this because of the time that this movie came out. They do a lot to make you think that Jericho or Action Jackson is not just like a straight ass kicker, like, all I'm going to do is blow everything up cop. Like, they try to give him some like level of, I don't want to say intelligence to totally like degrade it, but they make him more than, this is going to sound shitty, but I'll put it out there. He's not just like a stereotypical black guy in an action movie at this point. Like, he's a fully fleshed out character who has rational thoughts and logical, conclusions to what he's doing. And granted, they kind of push him in some points where he's like, why'd you rip this guy's arm off? He had a spare, shit like that.
Yeah.
The one-liners and whatnot, which is common for the genre. But I never feel like, whenever I watch this movie, and I've seen this movie a handful of times, in my life, I never feel like they try to dumb down the character of Jericho Jackson. Like, he's feels
not
like
an insulting caricature.
He's not a stereotype. Yeah.
Yes. The one thing that there's a scene near the end where they are actually might be I'm not sure where it is. I think it's at the beginning, actually, when Action Jackson goes to this like dinner or whatever where Delaplane's getting, some award.
It's early. Yeah, it's like in the first 20,
it's a prestigious
30
award.
Sharon Stone's still awarded around at that point. So,
and there's an old guy that is asking like questions of Action Jackson. They're having like this really deep philosophical question. So they kind of plant the seed that, yeah, he's not just an ass kicker. He's like a man of culture or whatever. And he says, oh, so what do you think of Delaplane? He says, frankly, I think he's an asshole. And the guy's like, I think you might be right. Or, he's like, that's a really good assessment or something like that. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. They're trying to, like you said, they're trying to do this character building where he is not just a stereotype, a caricature of like
he's
the
not
action
Cobra.
hero.
He's not. Yeah.
Yeah. He's not. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. He's not Cobra, thankfully.
Well, yeah. I mean, I will never get tired of watching Cobra eat pizza like a dipshit, but I agree with you. Sharon Stone kind of leads us to the Action Jackson part of the movie because she asks, why do you call him Action? And I'm not going to jump around to the whole story, but I like how they break into, because this movie has a lot of character building up to this point where Sharon Stone dolefully says, why do they call you Action? And then you get this insane car chase with Carl Weathers on foot chasing a fucking taxi cab that I think they show is hitting 60 or 65 in major city streets at this point. I was like, I don't know. It's amazing. It's a very fun, it's a very unbelievable, but very fun sequence where he is running down a cab on foot, jumping on top of it like he's fucking Spider-Man, punching through a window and then somehow causing the car to catapult itself into a building, which explodes chaotically. And dude who's driving the car still somehow gets away.
You don't see where he goes, but yes, he gets away. I was gonna add to that. I think Carl Weathers is the only dude who could have a car chase scene where he's running and catching up to the car, and a few minutes later does a front flip while it drives towards him and jumps over the car, and like you said, the car like cartwheels into a building. Punches through a windshield. I was expecting him for some reason to do like a front kick through the window or something. Like God, what movie is that? I can't remember what it is, where like they're driving and
like he does a handstand and then like spins around into it or
grabs
something.
No, like as it's driving towards him, he just jumps feet first through the windshield and like kicks the guy.
Shit.
You know what I'm talking about? I don't know what movie that is, but
I think they did that in Sin City.
Oh, maybe.
I think that's what it was. Anyway, but yeah, no, I could see that. But I like how this played out. It's got a very fun 80s action movie like chase feel about it. It looks great. Like it's shot great. It's in full daylight, so you're seeing everything that they want you to see in it. I don't know. It's one of the better, as far as at least on this show. I mean, it beats the shit out of the Raw Deal chase scene that we watched.
There's something about the way that this movie looks, and you kind of brought up looks, and it reminds me when the reviewer that we were, the third party person that you read, says Die Hard, it very much captures, I don't know what it is about this time frame. Like, I don't know if it's the way, like the film stock that they used or something, or the cameras that they were using in the 80s, or if they just pumped a bunch of fog into everything, or the globe was so polluted with, you know, smog and shit that it just has this haze over everything.
Probably all the above.
Even when it's dark inside, yeah, could be a little column A, little column B. When it's dark inside and Vanity's doing her little set, it's very smoky. It has this kind of look to it. I really did expect some of the stuff. The way that this movie plays out is that there's this Action Jackson, that's the title, right? There are these little scenes, these little action scenes peppered through, but they very much try to do not mystery so much, but these like sleuthing part for him to try and figure out. It reminds me a lot of Beverly Hills Cop. I almost expected to hear like you know, like that whole theme song. It just,
sure,
you almost expect it to ring out. And for better or for worse, the character in this movie feels like it should almost be like an Axel Foley. You know, with Beverly Hills Cop, he's not so much actiony as in he's not really beating people up. Eddie Murphy isn't so much beating people up, but more of it is like his investigation, him sneaking around, him getting into. Action Jackson doesn't do this, but Beverly Hills Cop does more of getting into
Beverly
situations
Hills Cop
to talk
is comedy
himself out
Jackson.
of.
Action Jackson is Action Jackson. So.
Well, but I almost would argue that for being called Action Jackson, there's a lot of fucking like sneaking around, trying to figure out what the fuck's going on, trying to figure out why Delaplane makes a car called Haley that looks like a Fiero with a body kit on it. You know, it's just like,
God, I fucking hate the Fiero. My sister had a Fiero. I hate that car.
I love Fieros.
I would agree with you for the first third or so with this movie. I feel like once you get that car chase, I feel like there's a switch in this movie. Like up to this point, we're doing character development, we're building the world, and we're telling you what little, again, our synopsis guy, like he got way more story out of this than I ever have. Because to me, once you get that car chase, it's like, all right, all that's off. We're making an action movie now, and this is kind of what it is. And kind of from that point, you get you know what it kind of has a feeling of, now that I'm saying it out loud, it has a feeling of Bad Boys too. Like after you get past that first action chase, it's a lot of like, okay, I got to go to this guy because whatever's going on. Here's Billy from Predator. I'm going to go have this knife fight with him now, and some crazy shit happens. Of course, Carl Weathers gets out of that and moves from set A to set B. Why did he go there? We might or might not have found that out in the last scene, but once he gets to set B, here comes some other crazy shit. They're going to cut his balls off or something, you know, whatever. Yeah. Like it has a lot of that. And again, that's not a complaint. That actually, for me, action movies have a lot like when action movies are done right, they have a little bit of story to kind of keep you following what's happening. But once you get to a certain point in the movie, you just want a lot of excitement happening in fairly rapid succession. And this movie does that. It gives you about 30 minutes of world building as a whole. And then once it flips that switch, it goes full action movie and kind of doesn't really let up until the end.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I feel like there are these kind of pieces of action that come through and they're peppered in throughout. And there's some of it's little short bursts and some of it's longer scenes. Like you said, the taxi scene, but the taxi scene's like 45 minutes in of an hour and a half movie. Sure. And there's a lot of slinking around. There's a lot of going to talk to the guy. Like you said, talk to this guy, go meet this guy, find out information from this person. Vanity's along for the ride. She's a junkie. And you go to the hotel, almost all the stuff in the hotel when he's talking to the clerk dude, I cannot understand a word that guy's saying 90% of the time.
Oh, yeah. No.
But he's supposed to be saying something.
His vocal tone, that guy needs a podcast.
Oh, yeah. The Gargle with Glass podcast. Let's invite him on if he wasn't dead already. I can't understand what the fuck he's saying.
That's fine.
You could be telling me something. I don't know what it is. There's something that I can't put my finger on about this movie. There are a lot of one-liners, and we hear a lot of one-liners. I mean, that's a cliche of 80s action, and it's like almost a requirement. But the one-liners that come out to me, like, they don't hit. They're ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they are not funny.
The one that I've heard the most this week, kind of getting ready for this episode, is what we opened the show with, the "How do you like your ribs?" line. I always thought like the punchline comes after the setup. Like the setup comes, it's flipped. Like because he says something about like barbecue, and then he says, "How do you like your?" Like, shouldn't it be the other way around? I don't know. You're right. I don't think he delivers the one-liners but
well, it's not even him though, because there's so many characters. The big fat guy that's like the bodyguard in Vanity is like I guess she's
the dude who he punches like 30 times in the face or whatever.
Yeah, but there's a scene where there's this big bodyguard dude who's he gets the respect, or he respects Action Jackson. I'm just going to call him Jackson. He respects Jackson or Weathers. He respects him because he knocks him out or whatever, because he punches him a bunch and it doesn't do anything, but he ends up like tackling him and it knocks him out. So he becomes like the savior. I don't know. He's like the guardian angel for Vanity. And there's a scene later on where they're in a warehouse or something where Jackson's chained up and he's going to get burnt by Delaplane's bad goons, basically.
Coach. Yeah,
Coach's goons. And the big guy jumps from the top with one of those like hooks with the, like the pulley deals on the rope. And he says, "I'm Mr. Ed." What is it? Why are you jumping off and saying you're Mr. Ed? There's that. There's how do you like your ribs? There's that. There's the hot dog time, which we'll talk about. You'll be hearing later. There's the guy that
you'll be hearing a lot.
The guy from now on, the guy in the street that's just like when he steals his wallet. There's a guy that steals Jackson's wallet and he looks and sees he's a cop and he says, "Fuck a duck." I don't know why he says that. And then the big guy again gets another one-liner. "I hope this teaches you crime don't pay." Like as he's killing some dude.
See, all these years, I thought I'd been saying "fuck a duck" because of Inglourious Bastards, but now I realize I've actually been saying it because of Action Jackson. I've been duped.
I've been duped.
But I'm okay with that. I like both those movies. So we haven't talked much about Vanity, and she's kind of I don't feel like she's that important of a character, frankly.
Not really.
She's a big,
she's a love interest.
She comes up. She's a love interest, and she looks great in this movie. Yeah, you can see her boobs. She looks great in this movie. She dances like Paula Abdul because Paula Abdul told her to.
Choreographed. There we go.
Right.
That's a word.
Frankly, I liked her more in Never Die. Never
Die
Too Young
Twice.
to Die?
Yeah, Never Too Young to Die. Yeah.
Yeah. Gene Simmons.
Ragnar.
Whatever. Right. I like her better than that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like she's got much okay, she's a junkie, and I feel like half her lines are "I need a fix" or something to that effect.
Give me that Thorazine.
I feel like she just kind of dragged Carl Weathers down through half this movie.
I'd agree. I mean, I think that when you see Sharon Stone, you feel like she's going to be a love interest because she immediately, when they meet, there's that.
Well, she's
there's
gorgeous.
That too. And when they meet at the dinner, the award ceremony or whatever, she kind of is flirty with him. And then she kind of gets close to him because she realizes her husband's a turd and that he's, eliminating his competition. And
Coach.
Yeah, Coach is a turd. And he's taken out like union leaders or I don't even know who these other people are that he's going after, but they're getting killed.
I never picked up on that part. So thank you, Todd, whoever you are, for telling me that's what was going. I didn't catch that, but okay.
Then she runs to Jackson because she realizes her husband's dangerous, and she just the way that she's presented on that poster, like I said, the poster that I saw, which isn't the official one, but they put her face on behind Weathers and Vanity, and from the way that was presented, I was like, oh, that's Sharon Stone. She's going to be a kind of a big part of this movie. Well, they obviously revised it after the movie came out. She's in it for half an hour. She dies like kind of unceremoniously, like I said. And then I was expecting that she was going to be the love interest, and I even forgot Vanity was in the fucking movie again until she shows up in the movie. You know, just looking at the poster.
Have you seen? I'm looking through the posters now, looking for the one you're talking about.
Yeah,
and I don't think this is it, because this is the most blaxploitation poster I've seen for this movie by far, and one of the more like.
Oh, with the chain and he's swinging.
He's like no, it's got Carl Weathers shirtless. It looks like he's like tied to like a hunk of wood, or it looks like a telephone pole.
Oh, yeah.
It says Carl Weathers is Action Jackson, and it's got her in this like leotard thing and like thigh highs on the bottom. Like,
yeah, it's a little black dress.
Yeah, this didn't happen in this fucking movie. Okay, I see the one you're talking about now.
Yeah, it's the next one with Vanity. He's got the cigar.
Yeah, it's basically like the invert of the actual poster, but she's on the right-hand side.
Oh, yeah. That's the poster that I'm talking about.
And I don't remember what the DVD looked like, but this poster to me looks like, you remember when they did this with Bring Back Texas Chainsaw Massacre? You remember when DVDs were coming out and they would have movies that featured stars before they were stars, and they would blow them up on the poster, even though they're kind of barely in the movie. They did that with Texas Chainsaw 4 with McConaughey and Zellweger, because they won. No,
what the fuck is a Renee Zellweger?
Chappelle got it right. That's what this poster looks like to me, is like what was probably the DVD cover, because Sharon Stone's in this movie, sort of. So they're like, well, you know, the average, and this is a sad statement, but the average person who probably does know Carl Weathers but doesn't realize they know Carl Weathers by name, they know who Sharon Stone is, so they made this poster.
Well, it's like that in that Overboard movie with Adam Sandler. When he got big, they remarketed the movie with him on the cover looking like a fucking idiot, and he's in the movie for like 10 minutes, you know? Same deal.
Yeah. That was a DVD era thing. They did that shit constantly.
Well, it's just a market. I think see it on VHS and shit too. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, hey, let's resell this fucking thing. This sold 5 copies, but now that we put the person that is in this for like, he farts, he walks by and farts, and that's like, he's the star of this movie now all of a sudden.
Do we really need to break down the end of this movie? Because we're pushing up on runtime, which we try not to do. So you kind of know where this is going to go. Like, this is your standard action movie. Like, good guy fights bad guy. Who's going to win? Going to be the good guy, unless it's like the rare one-off. But this movie isn't that. This is very much set up to be...
follows the formula.
Yeah, and it is a damn shame. Like, I'm not going to bore you with the details of why this never got a sequel, because this movie was profitable. This movie made like 3 times its budget, so it should have got a sequel or sequels. You know, studio problems, but it's a damn shame that we didn't get more of them. Do we kind of want to start breaking into final thoughts, hot dogs, and that type of shit, and get to our question of the week stuff?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like you said, good guy fights bad guy, good guy wins. Ridiculous fight. 2x4 broomstick on the end with a shoe on the end. I looked
over to my other screen and watched Billy fall out the window into another window.
Yeah, if you go on IMDb for this movie, which we'll link in the show notes, you can see where he gets thrown from side to side. That's actually in, I think, like the trailer or whatever that's supposed to be.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, we can start breaking down hot dog time, and we can play our little clip here.
All right. Well, why don't you play the clip and lead us off?
John, you know what it's time for?
What is it time for?
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
It's hot dog time. You want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
Go first.
I'll go first, since I think you went first last time.
Who cares?
Since I'm sure people are keeping score at home. Let me start this off by saying that Carl Weathers is great in this movie. He is amazing. He does an amazing job of making you feel like he is Action Jackson. He's been in a bunch of movies. He's been in a bunch of supporting roles, but he makes you feel like he is Action Jackson. With that being said, unfortunately, I feel like, honestly, the rest of this movie falls pretty flat. It wants to be, as our third-party reviewer mentioned, Die Hard. It wants to be gritty like Die Hard, or even gritty like Raw Deal. I think Raw Deal is quite a bit grittier than this is, and it's a little bit more like mysterious. And this movie does have inklings of being almost a noir, like it has kind of some of those noir vibes to it, but they pepper in too many jokes that fall flat that really aren't funny to begin with. And they add even this corny joke or corny music to kind of lighten up and emphasize that it's supposed to be funny, but it just isn't. On top of that, I feel like it takes a long time to really get going. Like we said, there are these little peppered moments of action, but for a movie that has a title Action Jackson, it just takes too long to get to some of that action. There's just too many. Go see this guy to talk about a cat that's going to, find a leash to find the dog to go for a walk to get on a Mr. Ed or whatever. Love Carl Weathers. I was super shocked. My reaction last week when you told me was genuine. I did not know that he had passed away, and it really was like, oh shit. But I still have to give Action Jackson 5 protein pickups out of 11 hot dogs.
Okay. My feelings for Carl Weathers aside, because I love Carl Weathers. It's rare for me when you see a celebrity pass because they pass all the time. And usually I'm just like, whatever. But Carl Weathers is the one that I'm like, oh, this one kind of hurts. This one sucks. I'm bummed about this one. This movie, though, for me, you are going to instantly compare this movie to movies like Predator, which is not fair. You're going to compare this movie to movies like the entire Schwarzenegger catalog, and to a lesser extent, some of the contemporaries in this era like Stallone and Seagal, Van Damme, blah, blah, blah. I would go as far to say that I think this movie is better than the majority of, I'd say, Seagal movies for sure, Van Damme movies probably, Stallone movies for the most part. Schwarzenegger is a whole different thing. I love him too, so we won't even have that debate. But this movie's fun. Is this movie perfect? No. Is this movie over the top and give you all the... I think this movie gives you all the things you like, the minimum things you want and all the things you need out of an action movie. I think Carl Weathers is great in this movie. Frankly, he's a great leading man, and it's a damn shame that he didn't get to do, like, if he did more leading roles. Apparently I didn't see him, or I can't remember him at the moment, so it's a shame he didn't get more of that. This movie's fun. It has a lot of good action pieces. It's got a lot of good 80s cheesy dialogue. It's worth watching. It's worth kind of having a couple beers and sitting, but like, if you want an action movie to watch with your buddies and cheer on like Carl Weathers, this is a good choice to do it. You're not going to be pissed off that you watched it. Does it have moments where it drags a little bit? Sure. I feel like if we would have got Action Jackson 2 and so on, like, they probably would have smoothed some of that shit out, and it could have very well got better. But for what it is as a timepiece, capsule, it's fun, it's entertaining, it's worth going back to. I watch this probably every 2 to 3 years. It's not like on a regular rotation, but I do go back to it enough that I've seen this a handful of times. I'd give this a solid, probably a solid like 6.5. We'll call them Detroit Tiger Stadium Coney dogs, because why not? Out of 10 hot dogs. It's not like a perfect movie. It's fun though, and whenever I put this movie on, I never come away from it like, God, I wish I hadn't watched that again. That never happens with this. It's always worth, the hour and a half to kind of sit back and enjoy a good action flick with an amazing cast led by Carl Weathers. I feel like I just went around in a circle, but that's fine. I do that sometimes. So I digress.
Is it my turn to do hot dogs now?
No, you already did hot dogs. You can do them again if you want.
What?
Exactly. All right. Question of the week. So this week, because this is kind of a love affair with Carl Weathers this week, our question of the week was pretty straightforward. It was, what are your favorite films? So you don't have to narrow yourself to one, featuring Carl Weathers. Sean, where do you want me to start? I got responses on Instagram. I got one on Facebook, and I got a few on Twitter, X, whatever that is now. Where should I start?
Let's start on Facebook, since that's usually where we don't get too many.
Okay. So our friend John over on Facebook, his answer was Predator and Happy Gilmore, but my absolute favorite was the first time I saw him as a kid on the big screen as Action Jackson. John, I talked to you off mic about this. I'm glad that we got to cover this movie, and I hope that we didn't piss you off with it. If we did piss you off, please tell me, and we'll try to correct that in future episodes. We'll switch over to Instagram.
I'd love to hear how you're going to do that, but okay.
Well, we'll figure it out.
I'll make it up to you.
He'll make me suffer through a movie that I don't want to watch is what we'll do. So he knows the type of shit that I don't like. Switching gears over on Instagram, our buddy Drew over at Average Drewski, you can follow him on YouTube at Average Drewski, said the Rocky movies, Predator, Action Jackson, Happy Gilmore, Death Hunt, Combat Carl, and there's another movie called Force Something that cut off. He basically rattled off a shitload of Carl Weathers movies, and he's right about all of them. Scott over at the You Run Podcast Network, he mentioned the movie Predator, Rocky, Happy Gilmore, Action Jackson, but his cameo in Little Nicky is hilarious and his favorite role. I don't even remember Little Nicky, so I'm glad. I've never wanted to go back and watch Little Nicky, but now I have a reason to. So switching over to X/Twitter, we're going to start with our buddy Zach over at WWJ. You can follow him at Zach E. Clark. or at the Daily J, he just said flat out, Happy Gilmore tops his list. We move down the list to our buddy BP at Let's Talk Horror. You can follow his podcast at Let's Talk Horror. Please do. And you can follow him on YouTube as well. You might see some familiar faces on there sooner than later. Don't stop watching because of that. He says the Rocky films were a big part of my childhood, and Weathers was great in Rocky 3, especially, of course, Predator, which is one of the best movies ever made, and that is science. And he was great as Chubbs in Happy Gilmore. He was great in everything. Totally agree. Kevin and Jason over at K&J Podcast said Predator and Happy Gilmore. Dissect That Film said Predator and Happy Gilmore, and I also enjoy him in The Mandalorian. Let's see. Cliff Carl, who is at Doobie Shadow 420, said Predator and Action Jackson. Jacob, aka King Freak, at King Freak 1986, said Predator, as well as the Semi Skeptic, who is at Semi Skeptic Pod. They also said Predator. Our friend Ebony, who is at Ebony061, said Happy Gilmore. At Fist Mystic said he's never really been in a dud. I agree. Side note, good agent, I guess. He's shown as a cynical and old cop in a few episodes of The Shield. I gave up on The Shield well before Carl Weathers was on there. That would have been a reason for me to keep watching, to be perfectly honest. Did you watch that show at all, let alone when he was on it?
I think we talked about it a while ago, but yeah, that show's
I do too.
A little too corny for me.
At RA Geeks, Chris said, Baby, you got a stew going, which is a reference to his appearance on the show. Oh, what's that fucking show? I looked this up beforehand because I didn't know what it was. Arrested Development, which I didn't really get into that show, so I didn't know he was on that either, but I'm glad to see that he was on it because I know that show's super popular. And then lastly, at J to the Vizzy 87 said Action Jackson and his cameo in The Shield. So these are all great answers. Sean, what in your opinion, what are some of your favorite Carl Weathers roles?
I mean, I definitely got to give it up to Predator. I think that's him in Predator is great. The other one that I can think of off the top of my head that I really, really always enjoyed seeing him in, and I'm not a massive fan of this franchise, but Apollo Creed. I mean, that's just an iconic character in sports movies and movies in general. I think that first Rocky movie where they fight, and when they become friends later down the road in the subsequent Rocky movies, and, you know, Drago, of course, putting them down. That whole, like, living in America sequence and everything. When he's coming down to fight, I think he's fighting Drago, right? That's the thing I will always think about when I think about Carl Weathers. That's like the first thing that pops into my mind. And of course, I loved him on Mando.
So Mando's a show I fell off on, but I will agree with you that Carl Weathers on that show is fantastic. Predator is one of, if not my favorite science fiction movie, the only one, and it's kind of that borderline science fiction horror category. Coincidentally, Arnold's in the other one that I would say, like, it'd be between Predator and Terminator 2, which he's not in, but whatever. That's not what we're talking about today. So I love him in that. He's fantastic in that. I will say that, and I think I said this last week when this came up, that I do love him as Chubbs in Happy Gilmore. That I know that's a stupid movie. I know it's a silly movie, but his character in that is played so well and so goofy, and it's kind of out of character for him. If you think about, like, if you think of Carl Weathers as an action guy, seeing him as this goofy golf coach who's missing a hand, but really not, but they play it up. It's just played so well. And I don't know. For me, it's by far, like, I could probably rattle off movies I've seen Carl Weathers in for a while, but when I think Carl Weathers, Happy Gilmore is the one I go to. And it's always because of that stupid hand and the way they play it off. So they don't even try to play it off. They do it it's perfect because they don't try to play it off as like a fake hand, a real fake hand. So that's definitely my favorite. But yeah, I'm sure everyone's like this. You hear about actors or artists or whatever that pass, and a lot of times you're like, oh, that sucks, and you kind of move on with your day. This is one for me that kind of hit. I was like, oh, that one really sucks. Like, I feel like you actually lost someone with this one. So he's going to be missed. And I'm sure there's probably a couple things we'll get that he's got in the pipeline that have been shot that just haven't been released yet. But when that dries up, it's going to be a bummer. So, anything you want to add before we kind of peace out on this? Oh, shit, that guy's back.
I really liked him as Dylan in Predator.
You did?
Dylan, you son of a bitch.
What was your favorite scene in Predator with Dylan?
When they shoot all the shit up in the jungle.
It's fair. It's a good scene. I think that's all we got. So wrapping this up, if you have a name for that guy whose voice just pops up randomly and always catches me off guard, let us know. You can let us know in a number of places. Apparently, we can get comments on Spotify because I've been getting notifications about them this week. So let us know on Spotify. Let us know on the social medias. We're at Dewey Pod Monster fucking everywhere. If there's a social media, we are probably on it. Search Dewey Pod Monster. Tell us what to call that guy. Let us know other stuff. Let us know what you want us to watch, what you want us to talk about. If you want us to listen to something, we're open to suggestion, except for March. We kind of have that planned out. But aside from March, let us know. You can find all of our old episodes at crap.town, which is our site, or you can go to the Run Podcast Network site, which is at yourunpodcast.com. Sean, what do you have going on, or what did I forget? Let the people know.
Well, I just wanted to add, if you want your answer of the question of the week read on this episode, not this episode, but the next episode, you're going to have to answer the question of the week, and those are posted on social media at Dewey Pod Monster. I also want to thank everybody again for voting on the polls that they've been voting on. Been getting really weird. Some weird poll questions are coming up, and I don't know what that's all about, but thanks for voting on them. Anyways, if you could rate the podcast on the podcast platform of your choice, that'd be pretty cool. We appreciate that. And if you want to find out or keep up with my Michigan craft beer adventures, which are a little bit on hiatus, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com. You can also find me on all the social media at Draft Therapy.
Okay, so that's it. Again, until further notice, we just simply ask, how do you like your ribs? We'll see you next week. Cheers.
You lose, American asshole.
We were like slap happy from driving all day, and I'd like start whacking it around.